This isn't just another ancient hack. It's a forgotten sleep system that helped Native Americans survive freezing nights without modern comfort. What did they know about warmth, rest, and biology that we urgently need to relearn? Forget everything you think you know about roughing it in the wilderness. Modern campers complain about sleeping on hard ground for one night, but Native Americans survived brutal winters for thousands of years without down sleeping bags or foam pads. Their secret wasn't just toughness, it was pure genius. The ground is your enemy when temperatures drop. Even if you're wrapped in the warmest blankets imaginable, direct contact with frozen earth will suck the life right out of you. Your body heat gets absorbed faster than a sponge soaks up water. Native Americans figured this out long before anyone understood the science behind heat transfer. They never, and I mean never, slept directly on bare ground during cold months. That was basically a death sentence. Instead, they created elaborate sleeping platforms that would put modern camping gear to shame. Thick willow mats became the foundation. These weren't flimsy grass mats you might picture. We're talking about carefully woven, dense barriers that could support multiple people while blocking every bit of ground chill. But here's where it gets really clever. They didn't just throw down a mat and call it good. Layers of dry grass, pine needles, and whatever soft vegetation they could gather got piled on thick. Sometimes these natural mattresses reached knee-high. The deeper, the better, because more layers meant more trapped air, and trapped air meant warmth. Then there's the part that sounds almost too smart to believe. Some tribes actually shaped and compacted sections of soil into custom sleeping areas. These weren't random dirt piles. They were engineered heat batteries. During the day, these compacted earth beds absorbed warmth from sunlight and campfires. At night, they slowly released that stored heat, creating a gentle warming system that lasted for hours. The really brilliant touch was creating nest-like hollows for each person. Your body would sink slightly into these custom-shaped depressions, and warm air would get trapped in natural pockets all around you. Think of it like a human-sized bird's nest, perfectly contoured to hold heat where you needed it most. What's wild is how they understood that insulation from below mattered more than insulation from above. You could have the biggest fire in the world blazing nearby, but if cold ground was stealing your body heat through your back and legs, you'd still freeze. The earth acts like a massive heat sink, and without proper barriers, it'll drain your warmth faster than you can generate it. Every tribe had their own tricks for building these sleeping systems, but they all shared one non-negotiable rule: get off the ground or pay the price. This wasn't optional, it was survival. But ground insulation was just the beginning of their winter sleeping strategy. Once they solved the foundation problem, they turned their attention to something even more ingenious. When you've got nothing but animal skins between you and a frozen death, you better know how to use them right. Native Americans turned buffalo hides and furs into sophisticated thermal systems that would make modern sleeping bag engineers jealous. The secret wasn't just throwing a fur over yourself and hoping for the best. These weren't random blankets. They were carefully engineered layers, each with a specific job. The softest rabbit or deer skin went directly against the body because rough fur against skin all night? Nobody wants that scratchy nightmare. Then came the heavy hitters, thick buffalo fur or bear pelts in the middle, creating what we'd now call the insulation layer. But here's where it gets clever. The outermost layer was always leather side out, fur side in. Why flip it? Simple physics. The smooth leather acted like a windbreaker, blocking cold drafts from sneaking through the fur underneath. Meanwhile, the fur side absorbed and held body heat like a natural thermal battery. Smart positioning that kept warmth where it belonged, close to the skin. Different animals meant different jobs, and tribes knew exactly which hide worked best for what. Beaver pelts were gold for moisture control because they naturally repelled water while staying warm when damp. Bear fur was the heavyweight champion for pure heat retention. Rabbit skins were lightweight but incredibly soft for direct skin contact. Each animal's natural properties got matched to human needs with surgical precision. The really serious cold called for the ultimate setup: triple layer systems that some tribes perfected over generations. First layer, soft against skin. Second layer, thick insulating fur. Third layer, tough weatherproof hide on top. This wasn't just piling on more stuff randomly, it was creating a microenvironment that trapped warm air in multiple pockets while blocking every possible way for cold to sneak in. And the weird part is, They figured out something that took modern science decades to understand. Dead airspace is everything. Those layers didn't just sit flat against each other. They created tiny air gaps that held heated air like invisible cushions. Body heat got trapped in these pockets, creating a warm zone that surrounded sleepers all night long. The craftsmanship behind these sleeping systems was incredible too. Hides were prepared with techniques that kept them flexible even in brutal cold. Stiff, frozen leather is useless. You need materials that move with your body, that breathe just enough to prevent dangerous moisture buildup, but not so much that precious heat escapes. Women often spent entire seasons preparing these sleeping furs, softening them with specialized tools and techniques passed down through generations. A well-made sleeping hide could last years and literally mean the difference between life and death during the worst winter storms. But even the perfect fur setup was only part of staying alive through frozen nights. The real magic happened when you combined smart materials with even smarter human arrangements. When winter temperatures dropped below freezing, sleeping alone meant freezing alone. Native American families understood something modern campers often learn the hard way. Shared body heat wasn't just cozy, it was survival. Family sleeping arrangements looked nothing like today's everyone gets their own space approach. Instead, entire families created human heating systems by sleeping shoulder to shoulder on shared platforms. Picture a living, breathing furnace where each person contributed warmth to the collective pool. The math was simple. One person generates about 98 degrees of heat, but 4 people together? That's a portable heating unit that never runs out of fuel. Children always claim the center spots, nestled between parents and grandparents like precious cargo. This wasn't just about warmth, though kids lose body heat faster than adults. The middle position meant maximum protection from drafts, wild animals, and the bitter cold that crept in through lodge walls. Adults formed a protective barrier around the most vulnerable members, creating layers of human insulation. But here's where it gets interesting. Even the family dogs joined this nightly huddle. Those furry companions weren't just pets. They were 4-legged heating pads that added surprising warmth to the sleeping arrangement. Dogs naturally run warmer than humans, and their thick winter coats made them perfect bed partners during brutal cold snaps. Smart families never turned away an extra source of heat, no matter how many legs it walked on. The human furnace method meant 3, 4, sometimes even 5 people sharing the same hide coverings. Personal space became a luxury no one could afford when temperatures plummeted. Everyone contributed their body heat to a shared pool. Then everyone benefited from the combined warmth. It's like having a heating system that gets more efficient as you add more people. Then there's the positioning strategy. Families didn't just pile together randomly, they arranged themselves based on heat output and vulnerability. The healthiest adults who generated the most body warmth positioned themselves next to children or elderly family members who needed extra heat. Pregnant women often got prime spots surrounded by multiple heat sources. This communal sleeping approach created something remarkable, a self-regulating temperature system. When someone got too warm, they could shift slightly away from the group. Too cold? Snuggle closer. The arrangement constantly adjusted throughout the night as people naturally moved toward or away from heat sources. Modern survival experts still recommend this technique during emergencies. Makes sense, right? Your body is already producing heat. Why waste it heating empty space when you could be warming people? What made this system even more effective was how families combined shared body heat with strategic positioning inside their shelters. But the real genius came in how they arranged people based on age and heat output, a deliberate plan that ensured everyone survived even the coldest nights. When your life depends on staying warm through a brutal winter night, you don't just flop down anywhere and hope for the best. Native American families turned sleeping arrangements into a precise science, and every single person had their designated spot for maximum survival. The most vulnerable sleepers, babies, small children, and the elderly, were never placed near the edges where cold air could creep in. Children got the prime real estate right in the center of the sleeping area, completely surrounded by the warmest bodies in the family. Think of it like a human fortress, with the adults forming protective walls around those who needed the most heat. But here's where it gets really clever. The adults with the highest body heat output were strategically positioned next to anyone who struggled to stay warm. A strong, healthy hunter might sleep next to his aging grandmother, becoming her personal heater for the night. Pregnant women, who often felt colder, were nestled between two warm sleepers. Makes sense, right? Location within the dwelling was just as critical as who you slept next to. The sleeping spots closest to the entrance, those were avoided like the plague. Every time that door flap moved, icy air would rush in and steal precious warmth from anyone nearby. Instead, families claimed the deepest spots inside their lodges, as far from drafty openings as possible. Well, this nightly positioning wasn't random chaos either. Families developed specific arrangements that everyone knew by heart. The moment bedtime arrived, people would automatically move to their assigned spots without discussion. Children understood they belonged in the middle. Adults knew exactly which side to take based on who needed extra warmth that night. Then there's the fascinating shuffle that happened throughout the night. Native Americans weren't just lying there like logs, they were actively seeking out the warmest pockets of air and adjusting positions as temperatures dropped. Someone might start the evening on the outer edge, but gradually work their way toward the center as the fire died down. And the weird part is how they treated these sleeping formations like living, breathing organisms. If someone got too hot in the middle of the pack, they could migrate outward. If another person felt a chill, the group would instinctively close ranks and pull them deeper into the warm zone. Everyone was constantly monitoring not just their own comfort, but the warmth of their family members. The most experienced sleepers, usually the grandmothers, became the unofficial architects of these arrangements. They direct the nightly positioning based on weather conditions, who was feeling sick, or which children needed extra attention. Their knowledge could mean the difference between a comfortable night and a dangerous one. But even the smartest positioning meant nothing without the right techniques for trapping that precious body heat once everyone was settled. The secret behind Native American winter survival wasn't just about having the right materials, it was about using them like a master chef layers flavors. They basically invented what we now call the onion principle in clothing, except they applied it to their beds. Smart? Absolutely. Here's how they did it. The softest, most comfortable hides went directly against the skin. No scratchy surfaces or rough patches touching bare flesh during those brutal winter nights. Makes sense, right? Then came the thick, fluffy furs as the middle layer. This was the thermal powerhouse, the insulation that trapped body heat like a cozy prison. Finally, the toughest, most wind-resistant tanned hides formed the outer shell, blocking those sneaky drafts that could turn a warm sleeper into a human popsicle. But the real genius wasn't just in the layers themselves. Native Americans understood something modern campers often miss. Your body has natural heat zones, and you better use them wisely. Hands got tucked firmly into armpits, creating little furnaces of warmth. Feet were drawn up close to the torso instead of stretched out where they'd freeze. Knees bent, bodies curled. They slept like human question marks, maximizing heat retention. Children received special treatment in this layering system. They weren't just wrapped up and forgotten about. They were bundled like precious cargo and pressed close to adults who acted as living heating pads. Nobody got left out in the cold, literally. The whole family became one giant multi-layered heating unit. Then there's the bedding edge technique that would make any engineer proud. Those clever individuals figured out that all the perfect layers in the world meant nothing if cold air could sneak in through gaps. So they folded bedding edges carefully, sometimes weighing them down with stones or tucking them under bodies. Every potential draft entrance got sealed off like they were preparing for a siege against winter itself. The attention to detail was remarkable. Different furs served different purposes. Some absorbed moisture, while others focused purely on heat retention. Beaver pelts, for instance, naturally repelled water, making them perfect outer layers in damp conditions. Wolf fur provided incredible insulation, but needed protection from moisture, so it went in the middle. What's fascinating is how this layering system adapted to different situations. Mild nights meant fewer layers. Brutal storms called for the full treatment. 3, sometimes 4 distinct layers of different materials, each serving its specific purpose in the warmth equation. The whole setup worked like a sophisticated climate control system, except it was made entirely from natural materials and powered by body heat and clever positioning. No electricity, no fancy synthetic fabrics, just smart layering that kept families alive through the harshest winters. Of course, even the most perfectly layered bed meant little without the right shelter techniques to back it up. Snow was actually their secret weapon. While most people today see snow as the enemy of warmth, Native Americans turned it into their best friend during brutal winter nights. They'd pile it thick against lodge walls, creating what basically amounted to nature's own insulation system. That fluffy white stuff trapped air pockets that kept the cold from seeping through gaps in the shelter walls. But here's where it gets clever. They knew the difference between good snow and bad snow. Fresh, powdery snow worked like a charm because it held more air. Wet, heavy snow? Not so much. The tribes would actually pack the right kind of snow around their shelters, like they were building snow forts, except these forts kept families alive through months of freezing temperatures. Wind was the real killer, though. You could have the warmest fire and the thickest furs, but if icy wind kept blasting through your shelter, you'd freeze anyway. Smart lodge construction meant heavy buffalo hides stretched tight over strong wooden frames. No flapping, no gaps, no mercy for winter's worst tantrums. The smoke hole at the top presented a tricky puzzle. Too big and precious heat escaped faster than a rabbit from a wolf. Too small, and everyone choked on smoke all night long. Native Americans figured out the perfect balance, just large enough to let smoke drift out, but small enough to keep most of the warmth trapped inside where it belonged. Then there's the entrance situation. Ever notice how modern houses have doors facing all directions? Not these shelters. The doorway always faced away from the direction where winter winds typically howled in from. If storms usually came from the north, the door pointed south. Simple geography became survival strategy. When blizzards hit especially hard, extra coverings went up over entrances. Sometimes double or even triple layers of hides created airlocks that worked better than anything we have today. You'd push through one layer, then another, with trapped air cushions between each barrier. The wind might be screaming outside, but inside stayed remarkably calm. The whole shelter became like a thermos bottle. Heat generated from body warmth, fires, and even breathing got trapped and recycled instead of vanishing into the frozen night. Every element worked together. The snow insulation, the tight hide walls, the strategic positioning, the carefully managed openings. What's really fascinating is how they used the landscape itself. Shelters got tucked into natural windbreaks like rock formations or dense tree clusters. The earth provided one more layer of protection against the elements trying to steal their warmth. All these shelter tricks created the perfect environment for their sophisticated sleeping arrangements. The structure held the heat, but the real magic happened in how families organized themselves once they crawled under those carefully layered furs and hides for the night. Fire inside a shelter sounds like a recipe for disaster, right? But Native Americans had this down to a science. They weren't just throwing logs on a pile and hoping for the best. Every flame was calculated, every ember purposeful. The secret wasn't building big roaring fires like you see in movies. Those would fill the lodge with choking smoke and turn everyone into human jerky. Instead, they built small controlled fires that burned clean and steady. Think of it like the difference between a blowtorch and a candle. Both give heat, but only one lets you breathe. Managing smoke was the real trick here. These weren't random campfires, they were engineered heating systems. The smoke hole at the top of the lodge worked like a chimney, but it had to be just the right size. Too big and all your precious heat escapes into the night sky. Too small and everyone's coughing their lungs out. But here's where it gets clever. They didn't just let the fire burn and forget about it. Someone always stayed awake to tend the flames. Fire duty rotated through the night, with different family members taking shifts. One person would keep the fire fed with just enough fuel, then wake up the next person for their turn. It was like having a living thermostat. The real genius was in heat storage. They'd place rocks or pack down earth around the fire pit before lighting anything. These materials soaked up heat like sponges during the evening, then slowly released that warmth for hours after the flames died down. Even when the fire reduced to glowing embers, those heated stones kept radiating comfort through the coldest part of the night. Fire placement mattered too. The fire wasn't stuck in the center just because it looked nice there. It was positioned to heat the sleeping areas without creating dangerous hotspots. Too close to bedding and you've got a problem. Too far away and people freeze. They found that sweet spot where warmth spread evenly without risk. And the weird part is, they could control temperature by adjusting airflow. Opening or closing the door, flaps slightly changed how the fire burned and where the heat went. It's like having ancient climate control. No electricity required. Different types of wood burned cleaner than others. Hardwoods gave steady, long-lasting heat with less smoke. Softwoods caught fire easily but burned fast and smoky. They knew exactly which wood to use when creating fires that worked with their sleeping schedule instead of against it. The fire wasn't just about warmth either. It provided light for late-night needs, kept dangerous animals away, and served as a gathering point for the family. But most importantly, it was the heart that kept everyone alive through brutal winter nights when outside temperatures could kill within hours.